Welcome to India's best kept secret.
Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I am Tanvi Taneja, coming up in the next 30 minutes. India lodges strong protest over Canada's allegations against Home Minister Amit Shah. War of words further intensifies in final days of US election campaign. Trump says Harris is candidate of endless wars. Harris alleges Trump obsessed with revenge. Spain will deploy 10,000 more troops and police officers to eastern Valencia region devastated by floods. Death toll rises to 211. And Jadeja, Ashwin, Pant and Gill lead India's fight back to put hosts in driver's seat after the end of day 2 in the ongoing third and final test match against New Zealand in Mumbai. India has rejected Canada's allegations against its Home Minister. In a media briefing on Saturday, Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson Randhir Jaiswal informed that New Delhi summoned the representative of the Canadian High Commission yesterday and protested in the strongest terms the absurd and baseless references by Deputy Minister David Morrison.
We had summoned the representative of the Canadian High Commission yesterday. A diplomatic note was handed over in reference to the proceedings of the Standing Committee on Public Safety and National Security in Ottawa on October 29, 2024. It was conveyed in a note that the Government of India protests in the strongest terms to the absurd and baseless references made to the Union Home Minister of India before the committee by Deputy Minister David Morrison. In fact, the revelation that high Canadian officials deliberately leak unfounded insinuations to the international media as part of a conscious strategy to discredit India and influence other nations only confirms the view Government of India has long held about current Canadian government's political agenda and behavioral pattern. Such irresponsible actions will have serious consequences for bilateral ties.
India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar today attended an event for the launch of a book called Friends, India's Closest Strategic Partners, authored by Professor Sriram Chaulia. The External Affairs Minister said that the growth of relationships among international partners has majorly been due to the special interest of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and it is because Prime Minister Modi has taken great interest in enhancing India's friendships across the world. Jaishankar also said that US, Japan and Australia have benefited from Quad.
The truth is that relationships develop when interests intersect or at least converge. Undoubtedly, sentiment and values do play a part, but not when divorced from interests. Personal association with these transformations do enable me to offer my own insights. 3 of them, US, Japan and Australia, have benefited from the Quad. They are actually examples of overcoming the hesitations of history. 2, UAE and Israel are from a region that is being engaged comprehensively at last. And the final 2, Russia and France, are actually statements of multipolarity, ours as much as theirs.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis have reaffirmed their commitment to strengthen strategic partnership between the two countries. In a telephonic conversation, both leaders appreciated the momentum generated in bilateral ties through recent high-level exchanges. They agreed to deepen collaboration across trade, defense, shipping and connectivity. The two leaders also exchanged views on various regional and global issues of interest, including IMEEC, India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor, and developments in West Asia. In his call, Prime Minister Mitsotakis congratulated Prime Minister Modi on his re-election following the general elections in India. In a post on X, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said that Greece is a valued partner for India within the EU as well. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar will be on a 6-day visit to Australia and Singapore starting Sunday. Dr. Jaishankar will travel to Brisbane and inaugurate India's 4th consulate in Australia. He will also co-chair the 15th Foreign Ministers' Framework Dialogue with his Australian counterpart Penny Wong in Canberra. The External Affairs Minister will deliver the keynote address at the inaugural session of the 2nd Raisina Down Under to be held in the Australian Parliament House. He's also scheduled to have interactions with Australian leadership, parliamentarians, members of the Indian diaspora, business community, media and think tanks. On the second leg of the visit, the External Affairs Minister will travel to Singapore for an official visit on 8th of November, during which he will address the 8th Roundtable of ASEAN-India Network of Think Tanks. He will also meet the leadership of Singapore to review the close partnership between the two countries and explore avenues to further enhance the bilateral relationship. India's Minister of External Affairs, Dr. S. Jaishankar, met his counterpart from Thailand, Maris Sangiampongsa, in New Delhi today. The two leaders discussed India-Thailand ties, multilateral cooperation and regional developments. In a social media post, Dr. Jaishankar said that Foreign Minister Sangiampongsa's visit for the royal Kathina ceremony exemplifies the long-standing historical and cultural relations between the two countries. On to Bangladesh. Sanatan Jagran Manch held a massive rally in Chattogram on Friday, demanding the withdrawal of a false case filed against 19 people, including Chinmoy Krishna Das Brahmachari of International Society for Krishna Consciousness. The platform issued a 2-day ultimatum and threatened to launch a series of protests if the case is not withdrawn by coming Monday. Chinmoy Krishna Das is the spokesperson of Sanatan Jagran Manch, a platform advocating the rights of Hindus and other minorities in Bangladesh. On Wednesday night, BNP worker Feroz Khan from Chittagong filed a sedition case against Chinmoy Krishna Das Brahmachari and 18 others for allegedly hoisting a saffron flag above Bangladesh's national flag at Chattogram's independent monument last week. And on to the race for the White House. With 3 days to go until the U.S. presidential election, Republican Donald Trump and Democrat Kamala Harris are campaigning hard in a last-minute bid to woo voters. The focus is shifting to voter turnout in key battleground states with renewed vigor in projecting key issues.
Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are traveling from one state to another to impart last-hour impression on voters, as Wisconsin is one of the key swing states. Both parties on Friday reiterated their issues to address the concerns of the voters. As Republican candidate Trump focused on migrants, jobs and border security, Democratic Kamala Harris assured tax cut and elderly health care.
Of all new jobs, net job gains in the past year have gone to illegal migrants. And the jobs were taken from African Americans, Hispanic Americans, and union workers. I don't think the unions are too happy about this. But I told you this was going to happen. It was inevitable.
And at the top of my list is bringing down the cost of living for you. That will be my focus every single day as president, including I will give a middle-class tax cut to over 100 million Americans. If you are caring then for an elderly parent or relative, my plan is to cover the cost of home care under Medicare.
Harris, who only entered the race in July after President Joe Biden dropped out amid fears over his declining mental acuity, was joined on stage by star rapper Cardi B in the latest of the series of high-energy events. Earlier, Harris reprimanded Trump for using violent rhetoric when discussing one of his chief Republican critics.
He has increased his violent rhetoric, Donald Trump has, about political opponents, and in great detail, suggested rifles should be trained on former Representative Liz Cheney. This must be disqualifying. Anyone who wants to be president of the United States who uses that kind of violent rhetoric is clearly disqualified and unqualified to be president.
More than 70 million Americans have already cast their ballots ahead of Election Day on Tuesday. Opinion polls show Trump and Harris running neck to neck, with victory depending on who prevails across the 7 swing states. Bureau Report, DD India.
Meanwhile, a judge in the U.S. state of Georgia issued an order on Friday extending the deadline for the return and counting of absentee ballots after a county failed to promptly send out some 3,000 mail-in ballots for Tuesday's election that were requested by the deadline. Under Georgia state law, eligible voters may request an absentee ballot up to 11 days before any election. Civil rights groups said Cobb County had violated the law and asked the judge to extend the return deadline on the ballots by 3 days to November the 8th. So DD India is closely following the election trail in the United States. My colleague Shubhendu Ghosh is in Atlanta in the swing state of Georgia. He scans through some of the prominent newspapers and takes us through the latest developments in the political contest for the White House.
We are at the beautiful Emory University campus here in Atlanta. Behind me, you can see the sports arena. A football match is underway. The other sports also being practiced there. Let's turn to the newspapers of the day and the big stories related to the election. I'm looking at the USA Today first. And the article on the front page tries to capture the palpable tension in the air as we approach November 5th. It says the United States of anxiety and lists all the reasons why it is so. 2 assassination attempts, a last-minute candidate switch, war in the Middle East, border issues, dire prediction of dictatorship, death threats against election workers. Those are some of the reasons why the tensions and concerns have been on the rise as far as this election is concerned. What this article does is that it surveys views of ordinary voters about how they're feeling about the election day. The next article from the same newspaper, we turn to the opinion page. It's interesting because there are 2 articles here, one supporting why Kamala Harris deserves to be the next president, and the second one about why Donald Trump might get all the support. The first one, it's written by Sarah Pequeno. She's a columnist with the newspaper. The headline reads, "With abortion rights on the line, we can't afford a Trump win." So the heart of this election, the issue of women's rights, especially vis-a-vis abortion, makes it very, very crucial, according to the writer, that the women voters and others who support women's rights must stand up with Kamala Harris. We turn to the next opinion article. It is by Nicole Russell, and she says, it's interesting, she says, "I dislike Trump, but I'm still voting for him." And she lists the reason why it's so. And she says that it would have been better if Republican Party had come up with another presidential candidate. But when she compares Donald Trump with Kamala Harris for various range of issues, she thinks Donald Trump may be the right choice to become the next president. And she talks about the various key themes, why it is so. She talks about the foreign policy is one issue in which she thinks that Donald Trump coming into the office could change the manner in which the conflicts are headed ahead. The economy, which is a common concern for all sections of society. And finally, the border security. And she says that Donald Trump has shown and spoken that he can handle all of these issues better than Kamala Harris. So the next paper I'm looking at is the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. On the front page, an issue that is making news, especially in the run-up to the main election day, the controversy around voting fraud. It says the 2020 election fraud claims persist, but most are debunked. Instead of confirming a conspiracy, investigators have just shown that there have been some isolated cases of errors in the vote counting and other processes, not a fraud, election fraud that Donald Trump had spoken about in 2020. Those were some of the big stories in the newspapers today. With camera person Jay Shankar, Shubhendu Ghosh for DD India in Atlanta.
Still to come on this edition of DD India Live. Volunteers clean up storm-damaged areas in Spain's Alfafar. UN COP16 Nature Summit in Cali, Colombia creates permanent body for indigenous peoples. And traditional Day of the Dead celebrated in parts of Latin America with a variety of tributes to remember the departed.
Who will be the next president of United States of America?
Will Donald Trump make a dramatic comeback, or will Kamala Harris become America's first woman president?
It's a tight race to the White House.
The knives are out and the battle lines sharply drawn.
He's becoming increasingly unstable and unhinged.
She's a threat to democracy because she shouldn't even be the candidate.
I'm Amritpal Singh.
I'm Shubhendu Ghosh.
We travel across the United States
To decode the issues at the heart of this polarized election.
Watch this space only on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Live. I'm Tanvi Taneja. The death toll in Spain's worst floods reached 211 on Saturday as fears grew for the dozens missing as hopes of finding survivors fade. The floods have tossed vehicles, collapsed bridges and covered towns with mud since Tuesday. And these are European countries' deadliest floods in decades. Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez addressed the nation on Saturday and announced a special aid package, an extra 10,000 troops and police for the flood-hit areas.
I would also like to inform you that I have ordered, as I have also communicated to President Masson, the deployment today of 5,000 additional national police and civil guards, doubling the number of those already deployed to bring the total number of both civil guard and national police deployed in the areas affected by these floods to 10,000.
So with the dynamics of climate changing the world over, a report has found that climate change played a role in the catastrophic floods in Spain. An analyst from Climameter, the organization behind the report, said that climate change contributed to the intensity of the precipitation that triggered the floods. Officials said that the death toll is likely to keep rising. It is already Spain's worst flood-related disaster in modern history and the deadliest to hit Europe since 1970s.
Climate change played a role in the intensity of the precipitation that led to the floods. So that's the main result, up to 7 millimeters per day, more precipitation than in the past. So we basically compared similar storms in the present and in the past. So in the present meaning from 2002 until today, and the past is from 1979 to 2002. So basically, we've already seen that climate change already played a role in increasing the intensity of the precipitation only in the last 50 years of data that we have.
On to the Russia-Ukraine conflict now. Ukraine is pushing its allies for long-range weapons, saying that thousands of North Korea troops are all set to enter the conflict at a pivotal moment. More details in our next report.
The prospects of the involvement of North Korean troops has become the latest flashpoint in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that first thousands of soldiers from North Korea are near the Ukrainian border. Zelensky also slammed US, UK and Germany for not sending long-range ballistic missiles to Ukraine.
Putin is checking the reaction of the West. Putin is checking the reaction of NATO countries. Putin is also checking the reaction of South Korea. And I believe that after all these reactions, Putin will decide and increase the contingent. I believe that the reaction that is there today is nothing. It is zero. Then the number of Korean soldiers will be increased on our soil.
Accusing the US and South Korea of pushing the Korean peninsula into war scenarios, North Korea has vowed to continue self-defense efforts.
North Korea will further intensify its practical efforts to ensure the permanent stability of the Korean peninsula and the region in a responsible manner and resolutely counter any threat and challenge in the present and future.
Earlier, during North Korean foreign minister's visit to Moscow, the country vowed to stand by Russia until its victory in Ukraine. Raising alarm over North Korean troops' alleged involvement in the conflict, South Korea has said that it is considering all possible scenarios to send aid to Ukraine. Meanwhile, US has unveiled a new $425 million military assistance package for Ukraine. The aid includes air defense interceptors and anti-tank weapons. Bureau Report, DD India.
On to West Asia now. The Israeli army on Friday claimed that it had eliminated one of Hamas's last high-ranking members. The IDF said in a statement that Izz-al-Din Qassab, a member of Hamas's political bureau, had been eliminated during an airstrike in the southern Gaza town of Khan Yunis. Israel described Qassab as one of the last surviving high-ranking members of Hamas, responsible for coordinating with other groups in Gaza. The IDF said Qassab held the authority to direct the execution of terrorist attacks against the State of Israel. The United States on Friday announced the deployment of additional military assets to West Asia. The Pentagon said that the US will deploy B-52 bombers, fighter jets, refueling aircraft and Navy destroyers. The latest deployments would take place in the coming months. This decision comes as the USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier and its accompanying warships are set to depart the region soon. The move aims to maintain a robust US presence amid ongoing conflicts involving Israel, Hamas and Hezbollah. On to Cali, Colombia, where countries at the United Nations Conference of Parties 16 Summit on Nature agreed to create a permanent body for indigenous peoples under the United Nations Biodiversity Conservation. The decision was the big breakthrough to be achieved at the COP16 summit and recognizing the role that indigenous peoples play in conserving nature globally. Delegates also agreed on a specific role for Afro-descendant communities in the new subsidiary body. The COP16 summit hosted in Cali, Colombia was a follow-up to the historic 2022 Montreal Accord, which includes 23 measures to save plants and animal life. India's Minister of State for Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Kirtiwardhan Singh, met Armenian Deputy Minister for Environment, Akra Mirtkichan, in Cali, Colombia. This was on the sidelines of the 16th meeting of the Conference of Parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity. The leaders exchanged views on issues of mutual interest, including biodiversity, culture, and our shared history. A high-level Indian delegation participated in G20 Disaster Risk Reduction Working Group meeting in Brazil's Belém. The delegation was led by Principal Secretary to Prime Minister P.K. Mishra. With the active participation of the Indian delegation, consensus was arrived in finalizing the first ministerial declaration on disaster risk reduction. During the sessions, Mishra shared the progress made by the Government of India in reducing disaster risks and in upscaling disaster financing in the country. On to sports news. First, updates from the world of cricket. India are in the driver's seat after the end of day 2 in the ongoing third and final test match against New Zealand at the Wankhede Stadium in Mumbai. Ravindra Jadeja and Ravichandran Ashwin wreaked havoc as the duo took 7 New Zealand wickets between them in the second innings. New Zealand ended day 2 at 171 for the loss of 9 wickets and with a lead of 143 runs. Earlier, India were bowled out for 263, taking a first innings lead of 28 runs. Shubman Gill top scored with 90, while Rishabh Pant slammed 60 runs. In reply, left-arm New Zealand spinner Ajaz Patel picked a 5-wicket haul to bring the visitors back in the game. On day 1, Ravindra Jadeja claimed his 14th 5-wicket haul in Test cricket as India made a remarkable comeback to bowl out New Zealand for 235 runs. On to football. Vinicius Jr and Rafinha led Brazil's squad for this month's World Cup qualifiers, while Neymar was left out of the team named by coach Doordarshan Jr on Friday. Rafinha has been one of Barca's standout performers in the first half of the season and coming off the back of a goal in a 4-0 win over Real Madrid. He also had a hat-trick against Bayern Munich in the Champions League. Vinicius Jr will return to international action after missing last month's qualifiers with a neck injury, while Real Madrid teammate Enrique was left out. Brazil, who are fourth in the South American standings with 16 points, play Venezuela on November 14th before hosting Uruguay 5 days later. And for the first time in 36 years, Los Angeles held a championship parade for the Dodgers as tens of thousands of fans lined the streets of downtown LA on Friday to celebrate the franchise's 8th World Series championship. Thousands more gathered at Dodger Stadium for a pep rally in center field to conclude the festivities. The celebration began at the stadium and the parade wrapped up by noon as the buses carrying the World Series champions made their way to the field. For many players and manager Dave Roberts, the day honored both the Dodgers' World Series titles in the last 5 seasons. And a community of San Diego in Guatemala celebrated its traditional Day of the Dead on Friday with vibrant giant kites soaring high in the sky. Colorful skies and joyful atmosphere created a poignant reminder of love, remembrance, and the cycle of life, making the celebration a deeply meaningful occasion for the people of San Diego. Bolivians mark the Day of the Dead tradition on Friday with a variety of tributes to remember the departed that are thought to come back to earth for a day once a year. So with those Day of the Dead celebrations in Latin America, we wind up this edition of DD India Live. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. Connect with us on our different social media handles at DD India Live. And for those on the go, you can catch all the latest news and updates on our DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. So we'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Tanvi Taneja from all of us here in New Delhi. Thank you for watching. Namaskar.